reared there, and she can remember the Cameleers and coming up here as children, and the Cameleers used to be big, she said, big, upstanding men, all dressed with their beards and everything else, and she found them very hospitable people, and she can remember the fruit and this type of thing that they used to have and used to share.
However, these hospitable people faced challenges which helped bring their life in this country to an end.
They had a tough time because this was a period in Australia where there was an emerging sense of nationalism which was fairly racist. And indeed the Fathers of Federation, in their attempts to rally people to Federation, did play the race card. And the White Australia policy, of course, was the first act passed by the national government once that government had been formed. And so that made it hard then for non-whites in Australia. And there were deportations, including some Afghans. And of course, Afghans were unable to bring their families to join them after the passing of the White Australia policy.
They live for there a little bit what they save, and it's finished. Some of them, they went back home. Some of them, they even didn't reach home. They die. Majority die here. There's their graveyard here. And there they're gone. There.
As we go deeper into the outback, remnants of the Afghans are still with us today. A train that bears their name stands as a witness of past times. It was in 1770 when Captain Cook discovered the east coast of the land we know of today as Australia. Thereafter, Australia was colonized by the British in 1788. Cook's monumental journey took place on the Endeavour. We had a chance to view the replica of that historic vessel. Shortly after, we dropped into the Maritime Museum next door to where the replica of the Endeavour was anchored. There we came across artifacts and information stating that Indonesians were frequenting this land over 100 years prior to Cook's discovery. This led us to investigate the relationship between Muslims, Indonesia, and Australia. Australian author Eric Whitehouse laid claim that Australia was mapped by Muslims in the 9th century. He uses this map titled Sea of Java from Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi to prove this point. Our research could not conclusively prove that this was the map of Australia or the Sea of Java, since the only existing original map is in the Strasbourg University in France and is yet to be translated. However, he did present further evidences to support his claim. Sketches of Aboriginal cave paintings resemble Arab dhows, which had 2 masts, as opposed to the European ships, which had 3 or 4. In any case, what is clear is that Muslims frequented these regions, and from the 9th century they composed detailed maps of the known world. The port of Makassar, located on Sulawesi Island, was well known for its sea navigators. In the 1600s, they began traveling southeast to the land of Marigi. Marigi was a term they used to refer to Australia. Young merchants brought with them rice as well as tamarind fruit. The seed pods from the tamarind fruit added flavor to the rice. Due to this, the abundance of tamarind trees that span across our northern coast resulted from the seeds that were deposited by the Indonesians. In Canberra, we met Dr. Abdus Samad, who is of Makassan lineage.
There are two tribes in the southern Sulawesi, and but mostly known as Makassar, and the other tribe is Bugis or Buginis. They are sailors. So Islam came into Makassar or Sulawesi around 15th century, a bit late compared to Java and Sumatra.
And from about the 1700s, they were certainly coming regularly to Australia and using the monsoon winds to arrive in northern Australia, and then using the monsoon winds again going the other way 4 months later to return to Makassar.
In Darwin, every 4 years they have a celebration where either they do it in a place called Sulawesi in Indonesia, or in Darwin where they celebrate the coming of the Muslims.
They came to North Australia not for trade but for looking for what you call it, tripang, sea cucumber. That is sea cucumber, and they got in touch with the Aborigines there.
During that period, they would set up processing plants, if you like, to use modern day language, for the drying out and the preparation for storage of these trepangs.
Indonesians themselves did not consume trepang. Rather, it was boiled, gutted, then it was smoked in makeshift smokehouses and sold on the international market. The largest market was that of China, where trepang was considered a delicacy.
They were here for some time, and they were involved in, of course, in that period, in a lot of exchange with indigenous peoples, and also some Aboriginal practices, particularly around death and dying, which incorporated some Islamic practices.
I learned that they invited some Aborigines to come to Makassar.
Some anthropologists were able to trace people in Makassar who were actually of indigenous Australian lineage. For a long period, that was it was a frequent Muslim contact with Australia. From about 1906, the Trepangators were effectively excluded from entering Australia.
In the 1800s, the new colonial power of Australia imposed license restrictions on the Macassans. And on the 26th of July, 1906, a letter was sent from Australia to its neighbours in Sulawesi with the news that licensing will no longer be approved. Therefore, fishing for trepang will no longer be permitted. To continue our story about Aboriginals, we went back to Redfern, where Shahid Malik, who was nicknamed Rocky, is continuously working on community projects in order to help future Indigenous Australians. Rocky shared with us an interesting history of Aboriginals and how they became Muslims.
The message of Islam.
There was an old Aboriginal lady where I lived, and I asked her about Islam. She was alive when these stories were told. She was a little kid when the Muslims were still in Australia. And I asked her, how did our forefathers become Muslim? She said, when the Muslims came, they said, thou shalt not kill, and they didn't kill. When the Muslims came, they said, thou shalt not steal, and they didn't steal. When the Muslims came, they said, thou shalt not commit adultery, and they married our women. When they see the British soldiers, they're actually British then, come through to kill and rape Aboriginal women, the Muslims took up arms and defended. That's what made my people. She said, that's what made our people bow down to Allah.
The message of Islam.
But over time, when the Afghans built the railway and the government had no need for the Afghans, they sent them back to Afghanistan and left their Muslim wives and children. So over time, we kept the names like Abdullah and Malik and Ali, because my forefather's last name was Ali. But so we keep them names, but we didn't keep the Islamic culture because we had no Muslims. And over time, Christianity and missionaries, and particularly in the Stolen generation, where they took maybe 60,000 children in New South Wales alone,